Shalom from Jerusalem. This is TV7's Israel at War update. And as we're set to deliberate a number of issues to include the Gaza Strip with an anticipated decision on whether or not to ratchet up the intensity in the enclave alongside a joint communique published by the United States and over a dozen European nations condemning the Islamic Republic of Iran for attempted assassinations, kidnappings, and other malign activities throughout the various countries that have released a statement, and more issues. But before we discuss all of them much thoroughly in this context, I'd like to introduce our experts for today, to include Mr. Amir Oren, of course, who is our TV7 editor-at-large, Brigadier or retired Brigadier General Mark Emmett, who is the formerly an Assistant Secretary of State for Political and Military Affairs, and last but not least, Brigadier General in Reserve, Relik Shafir, formerly an Israel Air Force commander, a fighter pilot, and a long list of other positions. It's great to see all three of you. And I'd like to start with you, Mr. Oren, when we're looking at the Gaza Strip. Of course, there is a deadlock in diplomacy at this point in time. Nevertheless, the Trump administration and the Netanyahu government are fully coordinated on trying to formulate some type of final type of a proposal to the Islamist Hamas, with a caveat of, if that does not happen or is not adopted by Hamas, there are going to be dire consequences. What can you tell us about that?
So, Jonathan, it's a deadlock without deadline. The Israeli government has been considering its options. And of course, the problem is, if it goes full speed ahead and tries to take over those parts of the Gaza Strip, which up to now it has decided not to go into, and that is mostly in the central region of the Strip, the so-called central camps, that is refugee camps, even though they are not really camps. These are urban neighborhoods. Then, of course, it could endanger those hostages who are presumed to be kept there. Now, it is a sort of a deadly game of chicken. What the Israeli government is telling Hamas is, look, not fellows, look, criminals. We know that you are holding 20 hostages who are alive and 30 bodies of other hostages. We also know that you can harm those hostages if we are coming at you. But if you do that, you are going to lose your human cards, and we will obliterate you, as President Trump likes to say. And of course, this is a sort of a dare which Hamas may or may not take the Israeli government up on. And aside from that, there is some tension between the political echelon in Israel and the military echelon, because the military is more reluctant to do it for fear of hurting the hostages. So this is where it stands, this all or nothing proposal. And as you said, waiting for Hamas.
Thank you, Mr. Oren. I do have 2 points that I would like to mention. The first is that when we're talking about the tensions right now between the IDF and the government, there are tensions, but those are healthy tensions, in my opinion, where we are within the context of a democratic society, despite the fact that, of course, following the legislation of 76, where the IDF is subject to the political decision-making of the defense minister and, as such, also the prime minister, nonetheless, the IDF chief of general staff has the room to maneuver and not just to be a yes man, so to speak. So there is a vigorous discussion going on behind closed doors with regard to very tough decisions that need to be taken in the near future. What we do see in the Gaza Strip, however, the current situation is where there are two main pockets of resistance left. That is, as Mr. Oren has mentioned, the central Gaza Strip. There are very small pockets there of so-called resistance by the Islamist Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other terror organizations operating in that vicinity of the so-called refugee camps, as was mentioned, and Gaza City proper, where there are still small pockets there operating. The rest of Gaza is effectively under IDF control, and therefore, if the IDF wants to maneuver further, and this is the recommendation of IDF Chief of General Staff, Lieutenant General Eyal Zamir, in order to intensify and actually bring about the defeat of Hamas as such, he does right now recommend the encirclement, the kitul, we call it in Hebrew, besieging of those territories in a very effective manner that would then also allow the moving of certain civilian populations from those areas, and to once and for all deal with Hamas, to bring about its downfall, and to allow it also to capitulate once more. Let's see how this heads. But General Kimmett, when we're looking historically speaking at those type of scenarios where the final resistance falls into a number of pockets of territory, it's usually either the point before the defeat of those organizations or state actors, non-state actors in this case, or a situation where the country that is launching the attacks capitulates due to a type of war of attrition.
Yeah, I think that comparisons with state actors that are surrounded, let's take, for example, the surrounding of Berlin by the Americans, the Brits, and the Russians in World War II. There was somewhat of a definitive view that if you get into the heart of Berlin, that would end and cause the collapse of the Nazi regime. And it did. Hitler killed himself. His donuts then surrendered, and it was over. I don't think you have that same luxury today when you're talking about non-state actors. There is no center of gravity, physical center of gravity, no last bunker that you can attack and get the final leadership. They're very amorphous. They, of course, will ooze out of that area, either hidden as civilians through tunnel systems. But I don't think this notion of a physical final collapse, a final bunker for Hamas, is in the offing.
General Shafir, when we do look, however, in the context of the Gaza Strip, as General Kimmett says, and rightly so, Hamas is not necessarily a one body that is dealt with, but rather we do see its leadership both in Turkey and Qatar, elsewhere, operating, roaming quite freely, meeting with various leaders, and continuing their affairs on a global scheme. Let's not forget that they do also control territories in Lebanon, in the area of Tripoli, and other locations in Jordan, in Syria. So Hamas has been very active on other fronts. Why isn't the IDF more committed to dealing with them on a global stage, as was the pledge to do so from the onset after the atrocities committed on October 7th of 2023?
This is both a political and military question. Hamas is an ideology which is practiced by or followed by many of the Gazans. I don't know the percentages. They're not that as high as we think they are, but they are supported by a large minority in the population. They are well entrenched within the Gazan population, either above the ground or under the ground, with guerrilla type war machines, hand grenades, guns, Kalashnikovs, and booby traps and things of that nature, which are very easy to hide. And even if you go into a house and search for them, I'm not quite sure you'll be able to find all of these munitions. So their tactics has been and will probably be just to be to hide within the population in civilian clothing and use opportune moments to hit upon the Israeli soldiers. That would be an ongoing event that may last for years because the population is about 2.3 million. There are no houses to speak of. Most of Gaza is demolished. So they're living either in tents or in rubble houses, which are much easier to hide as terrorists. And they could switch from being a terrorist to being a civilian. Think of it more as a criminal that looks for an opportunity to break into a house or to rob someone. And we know that it's almost impossible to reach each and every one of them. So in this type of scenario, more a Somaliland scenario than anything else, it's virtually impossible to eradicate Hamas. And this kind of an entanglement would look more like Vietnam than anything else, where you wouldn't know who's Viet Cong and who's your supporter. So this is the exact situation or exact conflict between the military that understands this and Mr. Netanyahu, who is kind of forced by his right-wing compatriots to put pressure on conquering Gaza, which is a difficult thing to say. What does it mean when you conquer? You have to feed everybody. You have to take care of the sewage system, housing problems, etc. Does Israel want to be responsible for feeding 2.3 million people? And internationally, the situation is not good at this point, and it'll only get worse. So it's a difficult decision, not to speak of the harm that would come to the hostages and the horrific scenes that we might see once we get close to where they're being held. And I don't even want to imagine the type of atrocities that we might see on a live view. So very difficult decision for the prime minister and ministers, and we'll see what transpires.
Thank you, General. I will challenge you on a couple of points because I do think, first and foremost, I don't want to go into the whole hostage options about hostage rescue to give Hamas the added value or the benefit of being able to widen their imagination on this matter. But when we're talking about Hamas proper, they are the Muslim Brotherhood, an organization. Their ideology is Muslim Brotherhood. And there are methods, quite effective methods, that can eradicate or diminish their influence in the Gaza Strip. Take Egypt as an example, or Jordan as an example, where the Muslim Brotherhood roams quite broadly, ideologically speaking, but nonetheless, they are being dealt with day in and day out, and very successfully, I may add, with the various clans opposing the Muslim Brotherhood, receiving the keys to each city, so to speak, to deal with those various neighborhoods in a manner which aligns with the regime in Cairo. So we do have different options on the table, and of course, the Egyptians. We do need to remember they also need to deal with a very threatening reality in which millions upon millions are members of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. So that is also something that we should take into account. Of course, to be fair, there are roughly 200 or 250,000 members of the Muslim Brotherhood currently incarcerated in Egypt, so they do go out of their way to deal with this issue. But for Gaza, it's a smaller territory, and it can be dealt with accordingly. General Kimmett, you wanted to respond?
Yeah, two things. One of the key points that was just made is this notion that this could go on for quite some time. And I think it's important to understand that, particularly as opposed to what's happening inside of Egypt. While that's going on, Hamas is not a static organization. What's happening right now indicates to me that they have no shortage of volunteers to join Hamas. Stan McChrystal used to call it the terrorist calculus. You kill one, you create two. I also don't think that Egypt is a fair comparison because that's a centralized government that has all the tools, security tools at its hand, and it is seen as an inside force and an opposition force, a legitimate force inside of Egypt. There is no belief of legitimacy inside of Palestine for the IDF or the government of Israel. So I just think it's a bit of a tough comparison to somehow suggest that the way that Egypt has been able to control the Muslim Brotherhood, which, as you say, has been through pretty tough crackdowns, could be in any way compared to the capability of Israel to do the same thing inside of Gaza.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm going to stand my ground on this one, since I do think that if we go from a Machiavellian approach, where we see what is happening right now in eastern Rafah, for instance, where the Tarabin tribe has basically taken control of that territory, you don't see Hamas there anymore. And they have been quite effective in dealing with it. If Israel focuses merely on ensuring or enforcing that the Muslim Brotherhood does not pose a threat to local tribes and clans operating in different neighborhoods by establishing parameters rather than going into the neighborhoods themselves, this could effectively work. And we do see plenty of examples throughout history on this matter. Go ahead, General.
Well, I think then rather than using Egypt as a comparison, it may be more helpful to use Iraq as a comparison when in fighting ISIS, the solution was to use the tribes more than either the Iraqi security forces or the American forces. I agree with you that the tribes could be an effective alternative to Hamas. But the way that Israel is going about conducting a separate war, rather than the way that was done with the tribes in Anbar, which was no direct fighting on the part of the Iraqi security forces or the coalition forces, but tremendous amount of support given to those tribes. That may be a different technique, but it doesn't appear to me that Israel is interested in doing that type of proxy operation through the tribes rather than what they are doing, which is direct intervention with its own uniformed military forces.
Well, there is always a transition in that part, but we will discuss that more at length, I'm sure, also after this program. Mr. Oren, I'd like to raise another point that I started with at the beginning of today's discussion, and that is that the United States of America, the United Kingdom, Albania, Austria, Belgium, Canada, Czechia, Denmark, Finland, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, and Sweden condemn the growing number of state threats from Iranian intelligence services in our respective territories, as the statement goes. We are united in our opposition to the attempts of Iranian intelligence services to kill, kidnap, and harass people in Europe and North America in clear violation of our sovereignty. This is not new. Why now?
So condemnation is fine, but the reality is the Islamic Republic has been harassing its dissidents and exiles since 1979. Of course, it went after Shapur Bakhtiar, the former prime minister in France, and others, much like the Russians do. Apparently, enemies of the state, quote unquote, are more threatening to regimes than people from other countries. Of course, they also tried to kill Donald Trump, Mike Pompeo, and others, but their most energetic pursuit has been after enemies of the regime because they are fear they fear regime survival. So yes, those security services are collaborating. They are exchanging intelligence, and sometimes they hunt down the hit teams. But they wouldn't like to keep them in their jails for fear of then having their own people abducted, having hostages, which is also one trait which Iran, Hezbollah, and others have mastered, unfortunately. So, yes, they condemn.
Well, condemnation might not be enough. They do highlight, of course, the fact that they are trying to target current and foreign officials, meaning this is happening also against current European and American officials. We did see also the attack against a former politician in Spain who was shot just next to his office in Madrid. Others were targeted in the Netherlands and in Germany, and Sweden has, of course, also warned the intelligence agency there that the Iranians are actually using the known methodology of approaching criminal organizations, recruiting youngsters of ages under 15 at times, in order to direct them to assassinate various individuals, which is quite alarming and needs to be dealt with accordingly. A condemnation, again, is not enough. General Shafir, the Iranians are now demanding of the United States to compensate them in light of the American strikes of Midnight Hammer, Operation Midnight Hammer, against the three nuclear installations, if the United States would like to negotiate about the future of Tehran's nuclear aspirations. They seem to be in a funny attitude lately.
Well, they have to accommodate their internal public, and so they're playing poker with cards on the table, where the other side can see exactly what they have, and they have low numbers in their hands. But for them, if I understand their culture, saving face is of utmost importance. So, and they've actually talked about this. So if they're able to tell their constituents that they are holding their ground and negotiate with the Americans to give them some leeway so that they don't look like they're capitulating, then they would come to the table. Remember that Tehran is suffering from a terrible lack of water, so that there's very little drinking water actually in Tehran itself, as well as the southern part of the country. So they are in such a turmoil that they will hold on to anything or any story that they can sell so that they can save their face and their regime. And as you just mentioned, looking for some small victories all over Europe so they can show that they're holding their ground. But I think it's actually telling the Americans, give us something so that we can come to the table without losing our face. I know it sounds as if they don't have cards at all, but remember that their internal position is in jeopardy, and that is a lot more important than anything else, including the nuclear program.
Indeed. Well, President Trump does not seem impressed, General Kimmett, and it seems like August 31st remains the deadline for the Iranians to culminate some type of resolution to the nuclear issue. You have 2 minutes left. What do you think?
I don't think I need 2 minutes. Iran reminds me of the young man that murdered his parents and now is begging forgiveness from the court because he's an orphan. So this is laughable. It's ludicrous. I think we're going to be coming on August 31st, and it's going to look a lot like today.
Alas, do you see a scenario in which the United States will ultimately hold the Iranians once again accountable if they do indeed decide within a year, according to some intelligence reports, to pursue nuclear weapon capabilities?
I do, and I think it's not going to be the United States unilaterally. I think it's going to be in support of Israel, who I have no doubt will be leaning far forward to go against that renewed capacity than the United States will be. And I don't think the United States will have the capability to hold back the Israeli Air Force. So the best thing we can do is jump on board and help it.
Mr. Owen, 30 seconds. We do also see a challenge in Lebanon specifically, and tensions are rising.
Well, Jonathan, my crystal ball was hit by a midnight hammer and shattered. So looking ahead a year is too much. But in Lebanon, there are, surprisingly enough, good signs. Hezbollah does not dare challenge Israel. And even along the Syrian-Lebanese border, the security forces controlled by the new regime in Damascus are showing some resilience. Of course, they want to convince the Trump administration that they have now gone to the bright side, but too early to tell.
Indeed. Most reports indicate that the Iranians are transiting types of munitions and money and other aspects via small vehicles, transiting through northern Syria towards the Lebanese territory for the benefit of Hezbollah. Some are intercepted, the majority are not, according to what I hear, but nonetheless, we will discuss much more of this also in our edition tomorrow or tonight. So I'd like to immediately thank General Shafil, General Kimmett, and Mr. Oren for all of your insights, and to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. Israel has launched operations
on Vladimir Putin.
helping Iran develop. We have logic, we have rationale, we understand how the system operates.